What's up, everybody? It's been a long time since I've done a review of any kind on my channel, but there's a game that's out now that I think is certainly worth spending a little time talking about, and that is Project Cars. And to help me talk about it is Steven. Hey, Steven.
Hey, Jeremiah.
He's also Singularity80. For those of you who watch the podcast, you'll see him in chat. And Steven's here because we are both hardcore racing game fans, and I don't really have anyone else in the CSG group who likes racing games to talk about racing games with. So Steven and I were both really excited about this game, and now that it's out, we've both gotten the chance to play it for a couple of weeks, and we're just going to talk through it a little bit. So this is kind of a review, kind of a, hey, we're a couple hours in, what do we think so far? But before we start, just a little bit of background on what we like in racing games, the type of racing games we've played. I'll start with myself because I'm talking currently, so it makes sense, and that segue would have been smoother if I just kept going. But I started out playing Need for Speed games. I mean, I probably played some like F1 game or something on Windows 95, but simulators weren't really much back then, so I don't really count that. But I started playing Need for Speed games, played those for years and years, and then got into the Gran Turismo series on the PlayStation, which I'm guessing, Steven, you probably played quite a bit of that as well.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any racing fan has not played a ton of Gran Turismo at this point, but played a lot of that, and then got back in the Need for Speed series, the Burnout series, some more arcadey racers. But then in the past couple of years, I've also started getting excited about Project Cars, reading about it, playing other games like Assetto Corsa, playing some Forza, other stuff like that. You know, not the incredibly hardcore racing games like iRacing, but definitely stuff that's more difficult than your average arcade racer. And I really, really love racing games. I love cars. I love driving. And so for me, Project Cars, I've been extremely excited about for a long time. So, Steven, what is your racing game pedigree? Because you've been doing this for a little bit longer than I have.
Yeah. Really, though, it started about in the same place because I do think that Gran Turismo is really like the game that sort of launched simulation racing for, at least in mainstream. There were games prior to that, but I vividly remember the first two Gran Turismo games and just sinking massive amounts of hours into those. The dizzying number of cars and the tracks and the licensing I thought was so cool at the time. And then very much like you, I did do some of the Need for Speed games. I stopped short of the Underground series.
Oh, man. The Underground series was awesome. I mean, it was zero simulation, but...
Yeah. I think Hot Pursuit, the original Hot Pursuit, was the last one that I did for Need for Speed, and then I fully transversed over to the Burnout series and played... I've played all the Burnout titles. Burnout 3 and Burnout Revenge were some of the best times I'd ever had on my original Xbox and the 360.
Burnout 3 is, I think, is the pinnacle of that series. That game is a masterpiece.
It is. We need someone start a Kickstarter and get Burnout 6 going. And then really, as I, at this period in time, I was away from PC gaming, so I was strictly living on my Xbox, and thankfully the Forza series came along, which really brought simulation racers back to the forefront. Gran Turismo had competition all of a sudden. The Forza series really hit stride by about Game 3. Game 4 just really upped the numbers, and then the current iteration on Xbox One I have spent some time with. Hopefully Turn 10 will dial it back a little bit. It's a solid game, but it's becoming less and less simulation, especially as you look at like their newest title, Forza Horizon 2, which is really just only retains the graphics so much of the original Forza sim and ditches most of the sim.
Yeah, my impression with the Horizon series was more of like the fun, capitalizing on the Forza brand, and a fun, more accessible racer, and then the numbered ones were still the simulation ones. But it's still, hopefully they still put out more simulation ones and don't just take the success of Horizon and go off the rails with it, because that's kind of what happened to the Dirt series. Until the most recent Dirt game, which is currently in early access, is kind of getting back to the hardcore roots. But Dirt was getting very arcadey, and it started out pretty hardcore. But anyway, we're here to talk about Project Cars. And we're going to start. We're going to go through a couple different sections, just talk about different aspects. But as any car racing game aficionado knows, the most important thing about any car game is the cars. So that's what we're going to start with. And Steven, I think we're both in agreement on this. What would you say is the biggest weakness of the Cars and Project Cars?
Oddly enough, for giving its name, it's when compared to all the titles we just historically referenced, I would probably say this is, if the only weak point of Project Cars is its car selection. There's, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremiah, is it about 41, 42 cars that are in the game?
Something like that. I mean, the number can fluctuate a little bit depending on how you judge it, because there are quite a few cars that to the average person, they look like the exact same thing, even though they are slightly different versions of a race car or slightly different versions of a street car. It's in the 40s of, realistically, that's the number of unique cars in there. And I mean, that's not a terrible list for like an arcade game, but you got to think, like, even the original Gran Turismo, how many cars did that have? 200?
Close to that number, I think. 165, something like that. So.
And that was on the PlayStation 1, and you could modify all of those cars. That's the best thing about the Gran Turismo and Forza series to me, is you can buy a ton of performance parts and upgrade the cars and tune them and tweak them and everything like that. And Project Cars has a way fewer number of cars, and you can't add anything to them. Like, you can tune them, but you can't upgrade them. And for me, that takes kind of the fun out of it. Like, there's no economy in the game. I think it's cool they're all available right from the start. Like, you can just hop in and drive anything you want on any track. That's obviously some fan service. But, I mean, did you like the upgrading part, or is that less important to you? Because for me, it's a big deal. But
yeah, I want to think that Slightly Mad I think perhaps they did look at Forza 5 and Gran Turismo. I haven't seen what it's like in the later renditions of Gran Turismo. I dropped off on that series after about the 4th title.
That was about where you should have dropped off.
I really think that it really might have been a matter of they're clearly very racing focused, as I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other aspects about how, I mean, there are things about Project Cars that no game has really touched yet, but to leave out this particular part entirely is a little bit of a miss. It's minor. Being able to access any car you want, get on a track, start driving, that's something very few sim games want to offer you. Even in the time trial modes in certain games, you don't have the race any track you want, race any car you want, and go at it. So I do think it is a bit of a negative, because the upgrading and doing all that and starting from what might be just a very stock street car and bringing it up to a performance level, that's, to me, has become a staple of the simulation titles, even though perhaps a given player might take it beyond what's realistic. Just having that freedom is there.
Yeah, that's what I really like in Forza 4. I have I think a mid-70s Nissan Skyline, which starts out as a Type, I think, D automobile, so, one of the slower ones in the game. And I've taken it through a good chunk of my career at this point, upgrading it and just tweaking it. And now I'm at the point, I actually had to dial it back. I got it up to like somewhere around 700 horsepower, which, I mean, think about a mid-70s Skyline. Like, that car should not have that much power. I mean, you could be going down a straightaway. You could never floor it, ever, under any circumstance. Like, at over 130 miles an hour, you floor it, the car starts sliding sideways. Like, it can't do it. But I like that the option was there. That was one of my favorite things to do in Gran Turismo is, you save up a ton of money. And anytime you enter a new series, they're like, oh, you got to buy a new car in a different category. I'd go buy the car and instantly drop like $100,000 into making it just amazing and then hop in. And I kind of miss that here. Like, for me, the upgrading and the tweaking and the playing with the cars, I miss that a lot. Like, I really, really like that in games. That was my favorite thing about Need for Speed Underground, was that all the customization options to make the car look like something cool. Like, your car could be totally different than someone else's. And in this game, they have different liveries for the cars, but I might sound like an idiot here. How do you even change those? It seems like it gives you a random paint color every time.
It's not something I've messed with a lot, but it's clearly, it's a big option. Like, even if someone's not a huge fan of Forza 5, given where the series has gone, if you look on their online community, the customization stuff is just, it's off the charts with the amount of options and numbers of configurations and those kind of thing. And even in this game, where it just really seems like Slightly Mad didn't quite know what to do, they came, as we'll talk about, they have this nice feature where there's these different classes and all these different things that you can do as part of this simulation, but there's not a tuning or even a selection of cars that seems to align with the design, this grand design that they had in terms of the simulation. So it's not a it's not a game-killing miss or anything like that, but it's certainly something to be noted because it deviates from all the other games, quote, in its class.
And part of that might be because it's a more indie game. It's made by a much smaller team, and it can tell, like, their focus is very good, it's very strong, but they don't have the hundreds and hundreds of people it takes to put hundreds and hundreds of cars into a game. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they would have put more in if they were able to. And the cars they did put in are exquisitely modeled. I mean, the detail level, like you can find so many screenshots online comparing these cars to the real thing. And I mean, they did an amazing job. And honestly, like, as good of a job they did, I think it'd be kind of selfish to say, oh, well, I think we should have 200 more cars or something. Because the amount of money it would take to do that would be crazy. But I hope they keep putting out, like, new car packs. Like, they say they're going to do a free car every month. And the first one we got was the W Motors Lycan Hypersport, which was featured in Furious 7. And that's a really, really cool-looking car. And I think it's really awesome they gave it to everybody because it's the same level of quality that's in all the other cars. And, I mean, I would happily pay, $10 for another 10, 15 car pack. If, like, they added the Japanese Ricer pack or the classic American muscle pack. They could do, like, themed packs, movie cars or something like that. Like, I would pay for that. I mean, the overall game was, what, $40?
Yeah.
Something like that. So, like, I'm totally down to give them some more money. And I imagine they're probably working on stuff like that. They just don't want to announce it yet. But
And maybe one last note on this. To be fair, this is technically, if we really want to be a little technical, this is a lesser negative on the PC than it is on the consoles. On the consoles that have had long-running series of simulator games that have hundreds of cars and all these different things, it's a bigger miss if you're a PS4 or an Xbox One owner of Project Cars. On the PC right now, although we're seeing you had mentioned Dirt Rally, the early access game that they put out, and Assetto Corsa. These are all games that are available on the PC, but they all characteristically share low car counts. None of those games have any dizzying, 550 cars to choose from. So,
which is kind of funny thinking about, like, the PC has the car games with the fewer amounts of cars in them. But I mean, that's always been the case for whatever reason.
Yeah. I'm really happy, though, to see that Project Cars is just the latest in a resurgence of this genre on the PC. Assetto Corsa and Dirt Rally being PC exclusives, but Project Cars is just... It's not only good, but it's to me it's a strong competitor against those other two, and really happy to see that this is coming along nicely for PC gaming and for the consoles in terms of Project Cars.
Yeah. Although, on the PlayStation, I got to admit, as a PlayStation owner, I'm a little let down by my racing offerings. Like, I want another Gran Turismo game. Drive Club is not it. No. I don't know if it was ever supposed to be it, but it certainly isn't. And Project Cars is nice, but, like, man, when Gran Turismo 7 is announced, I'm totally getting that game day one for all the customization and the add-ons and everything else. Like I've told you, I've been tempted many occasions to buy an Xbox One just to play Forza 5. Yeah. So I really want that experience, and I don't think Project Cars, like, I don't even think they really compete in that way. But yeah, more cars would be nice.
I will be very interested to see what happens now. Really, my attention is focused. I will continue to play and follow Project Cars, but now I want to see, because one of Microsoft's big hallmark announcements for E3 was supposed to be a huge unveiling of Forza 6. And I'm really curious to see if Project Cars is going to affect what they're going to do in light of that becoming a big thing for E3. So we haven't really seen anything on Forza 6 since the unveiling of the cover car late last year. So now that this game has come out, and there are, as we'll talk about, there's notably several things that it could handily whip any of its competition, even on the consoles. I will be interested to see if it truly causes some ripples in the pond for its competitors.
I'd be surprised if it did on the Xbox as much. I'm betting on the PS4 it'll matter more because they haven't had a flagship racing game yet that's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Need for Speed and stuff, but on the Xbox One, they've gotten 2 Forza games already. So for an Xbox owner, I mean, they probably want to buy Project Cars if you like car racing games because not that many come out, but they at least have already gotten a taste of that big next-gen racing sim experience, whereas on the PlayStation, we haven't even gotten that yet. I mean, it's going to be going on 2 years, and we won't have gotten it. So, I'm guessing this game's going to sell a lot better on the PlayStation. I could be wrong, though, but I'm guessing if it sells really well on either platform, that will probably influence at least how the games are marketed or portrayed.
Yeah, I agree.
But now let's talk about tracks. This is an area where I think Project Cars does a lot better.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, I probably have raced on 10% of the tracks at this point, maybe.
Yeah. I've experimented probably to that level, maybe even slightly less. There are, to be fair, the number count is bolstered by several variations of the same track.
Yeah,
but even if you cut away and just took the individual locations, including the ones that are not real, the track count, especially for something that's just been released, is astounding.
Yeah, it's 30 locations, unique locations, and over 110 different courses. Every famous track you've ever heard of and a bunch you haven't, they're all here.
Yeah.
I haven't thought of one yet that was famous that was not available.
The only one that I'm aware of actually was brought up in a discussion a little while back was Sebring International Raceway is not on here.
Oh, Sebring isn't?
No. It's the only one I can think of, and that's not, even people I know who are big racing people, for most of them, if I asked them, name me 7 well-known road courses, none of them would say Sebring. But the only reason that I know it is that it's been a staple of the Forza series for 3 or 4 titles now. I think it first appeared in Forza 2, and it's been there ever since, all the way up to and including Forza 5. Mm-hmm. But that's the only one that I know that has any notoriety that seems to be missing. I would imagine some people may argue that, like Forza, if you're doing on a console, they have like representations of some of the really famous NASCAR tracks like Daytona and Talladega, but Project Cars is more geared for road course style racing, so I'm not knocking them for not having those courses available to us.
Yeah, I don't really feel the need to have stock car racing in this. I think stock car racing definitely has a place, but I don't think that would really add to the purpose of this game.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about tracks? I mean, I don't think there's much to say. Like, they're all here and they're amazing. I mean, they're awesome.
They're all very faithfully represented. I've not seen some of the variations that are available. Really here, I think where the big win, though, is just the sheer number. This is about double the amount of locations that comes with Forza 5 even to this day, and that's after, I think, close to 15 DLCs that have been added to that game since it released on launch day for Xbox. They've only added a couple of tracks in the Forza series since it released. The Turn 10, the developer, has indicated that track development is very resource and labor intensive, and they can't produce tracks as fast as they can cars.
Right.
But just thinking through all the series and various games that I've played, especially for a simulation, I've never seen a game come out with 30 unique, locations to play from that are real. And there are, I'm not exactly sure if it was just because they had the time why the made up locations are in there. It's certainly not a knock. It's
honestly
great.
The California highway is my favorite one to test out a new car on.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's not what Interstate 1 is actually like.
It's probably fairly similar. I haven't driven it on myself. My father's been out on it a few times, but
But I mean, turn for turn, I'm guessing that's not a faithful recreation because there's
yeah,
no
I
like
mean,
turn-offs for stuff really.
no.
But it looks like it certainly has the feel of it. But I really like that. That's just like a fun blast through the mountains next to the water. And there's so many of these tracks. Again, like with the cars, I haven't touched half of them yet.
Yeah.
It's going to be so long before I actually get all the way through them. But everything I've driven on is fantastic. And of course, I haven't driven on any of these tracks in real life, so I can't compare it to anything. But they're great. I have
Yeah.
zero complaints. Another thing I have zero complaints about is the graphics. If you've seen any screenshots floating around, this is
No.
debatably the most photorealistic game ever. At least
Yeah.
when it comes to cars and tracks. Now, like with every racing game, I think it's just tradition. All the people in the stands are kind of crappy looking, and
Yeah.
everything at a distance is a little bit crappy looking, but because they're using all those polygons for the cars and the tracks and stuff. But the tracks themselves, the cars, the lighting, the textures, like every facet of that experience is, I don't want to say perfect, but it's as close to perfect as I am smart enough to understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the amount of detail on the cars and really just some of the small details that even without having a technical level of expertise about how that actually gets generated, just the little things from solar flares to light reflections on the curves of the cars. It's the amount of detail is unprecedented. The car interiors, this has become a thing in sim games since Forza 4, and I don't recall if GT4 had it or not, but interiors has become a thing now. I'm kind of on the fence about that. I know if you drive from that perspective, that's going to matter a whole lot, but even the interiors have a ridiculous amount of realism to them, way more than Forza 5 or Forza 4 ever did from driving in that perspective. The way the roads look, the imperfections in the pavement, every of all the real locations, all the known landmarks are there. They're faithfully recreated. I'm actually rather happy that Slightly Mad didn't spend a lot of time on crowds or other, like, we'll call it race day clutter.
Yeah.
This game's about racing, and they put all the visual power of the game is right where it's supposed to be. If there's anything that I think that if we're talking about what's really excel and what's something you will notice, much like all other sims, so far there hasn't been a infinite capacity to support damage modeling. It's a little bit weak. It behaves. You can definitely tell. This is the one time when you wreck a car, you kind of remember that you're playing a game again. When you're driving clean and racing hard, every once in a while, I tend to forget I'm playing a game and I really kind of get into it and I know I'm driving. But when you wreck the car and you kind of see how it damages, it's not. I've seen damage modeling that's just as good or even slightly better, but this game is not designed to be played bumper car, so I'm not going to really knock Slightly Mad for that.
Yeah, the damage seems to be more of just a penalty for you hitting stuff than an actual accurate representation of what you actually would have done to the car. And honestly, like if I ever ding up a car really bad, I just restart the race because it is a game and, it doesn't matter. But it's better than the Gran Turismo series. I'd say it's probably, for me, about on par with the Forza series. It's definitely not realistic, but it serves as a good reminder that I can't just do anything I want, which in the Gran Turismo games, you kind of can. It's pretty easy to, cut corners and just ping-pong off other cars to keep yourself on the track. And this game will punish you, unless you turn the damage off, which, of course, you can do. But, yeah, the cars themselves, one thing I was going to say about the in-car view, Slightly Mad, they're the guys who did Need for Speed Shift, right?
Yes.
The thing I really liked about Shift that kind of got me back into Need for Speed a little bit was the in-car view. It wasn't just a static interior of the car. As you were racing, parts of the car would vibrate. Your view would shake around a little bit. They did a great job of making it seem like the car was straining hard as it got up to speed. And instead of just, look from the outside, it can look like just this little box gliding along on the ground, and it's kind of loud. But inside the car, everything was shrieking and vibrating and rattling. and your view was getting cloudy, and like it made driving fast even a little bit scary. And I think that's what a good racing game should do. Like if I hit 150 miles an hour, I want to be scared because that's so incredibly fast. And I think Project Cars does a pretty good job of making you feel that. Maybe not as good as Shift, but Shift was a little more arcadey too, so it was a little exaggerated. I like there's so many different views of the cars. Like you can race on the hood, down off the hood, on the roof, inside the car, inside your helmet, inside the middle of the car, and behind the car. Like no matter how you want to drive, they definitely have an option. And like I love driving inside the car. I think you like driving in front of the car, right?
I'm more conditioned to driving on the hood.
On the hood, okay.
My only gripe, and this is a universal, it's not a Project Cars, is that the way that the interiors, although very beautiful, but the way that just because of how they exist in a game, they're part of they become a fixed part of the screen. Whereas when you're driving a real car, if you're truly looking at the road and focusing on it, eventually your peripheral vision cancels out the dash and everything down below your eyesight.
Yeah.
Whereas in the game, it's almost utterly impossible to not see the dash and the steering wheel because it's drawn on the screen and you can't not focus past it.
Yeah.
So
I think I would love to try this game with like an Oculus Rift, because it has full Oculus Rift support. I think that would be a good test to see, like, how does because then, of course, you'll want to use the in-cockpit view if you do that. But I would love to see, like, does it feel significantly different, or are you still aware of that the whole time? Because you're right. When you're driving inside the car view, it really cuts your visibility down a lot in a way that you don't really feel when you're actually driving a car. But in the game, that's always kind of present, and it makes it a little bit harder to see. But the biggest reason, like, I like driving inside the car, I want to drive behind the car because I want to look at the cars because they're so pretty. But that's kind of the least accurate way to drive because you're getting much less feedback visually about how the car is doing. So I try not to, but usually on straightaways or something, I'll cycle through the presets just to stare at the backs of the cars. Them booties driving away in front of me. So graphically, the only other thing I want to talk about with that is Drive Club made a big stink about its real-time weather system, which, to be fair, does look really great. But Project Cars is better. Like if you're driving through a rainstorm, that is just crazy how good that looks.
It is. Yeah, it's almost all the graphical aspects. I really think Project Cars has set the bar now. I can't really think of anything where it really fails on, as far as, like, this game, it's matched every other title that's out there, if not surpassed it, and I would say it's a surpass in almost every category. In fact, at least on the PC, you touched on it a little bit earlier with Oculus Rift support, Jeremiah. This is also a game that on the PC side is totally built for the future. Project Cars can be tested and run. I believe the textures go up to 12K. I believe is it 8 or 12?
I thought it was 8. I could be wrong, but even then, 8K. I mean, 4K is still 5 years out from being commonly used for stuff. So the fact that it goes up that high is crazy.
Oculus support and support for graphic resolutions that aren't even possible yet. It's very well. This game could still be used in benchmarks 5 years from now, which is just crazy.
Well, that helps by the fact that it actually runs pretty well for how good it looks. And of course, a racing game is much simpler than like a giant open world game like The Witcher or Grand Theft Auto. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but for looking this good, I think everyone was pretty surprised how well it ran. And I agree with you. I think Project Cars is more of a platform than a game. And this is something I think Gran Turismo should have done years ago. I mean, I think Madden should do this. I think Call of Duty should do this. Just sell us the new content. Like, I don't need to see the track when it's 5% higher resolution or whatever. Like, I don't really care about that. Just give me all the new stuff. The track, the version of the Nürburgring I drove on in Gran Turismo 4, add a new lighting engine to that, maybe upscale the texture some. The track was fine. I don't want them to spend tons of extra time redoing that 3 years from now. I just want more content, more tracks, more cars, maybe customization one day. Who knows? Like, I'm kind of dreaming a little bit, but I'd be happy with them just leaving this as is for like 7 or 8 years. It'll still look good. I mean, people love iRacing, and that's not really a looker by modern standards, but it's a platform that you can just build on and add new things to, and that's really like the direction I hope they take this in, because I think the looks are there. I don't think they need to upgrade those for a very long time.
No, I totally agree with you. And even further, where Project Cars set the bar is not only do you have all this great visual glory to an individual car or a track, but they also totally set the bar by the upping the concurrent amount of cars, which I believe it's supported up to 24 at once.
It's something like that. Yeah.
That might be online. I think in single player it's close to 40, and that, as far to my knowledge of all the sim games and all the arcade games I played in the past, that completely destroys every title that came before Project Cars. Forza, I think, was the closest. Forza 5 would do 16 at once. Maybe it was only 12, but somewhere in the teens, and Project Cars has handily gotten that taken care of. So, and several of the reviews I read, the published reviews, were talking about that if Project Cars has one significant contribution to sim racing games, is that all future games must now have more concurrent cars on the track.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's definitely impressive. Although it's worth mentioning for anyone considering picking this up, the more cars you have, the more weather you have, the slower the game is going to run. So while it might sound really cool to be battling 30 other cars in the Nürburgring in the middle of a thunderstorm, you're going to have to cut your settings back a little bit to make that happen. Because a racing game is definitely the type of game where 60 FPS is beneficial to you, and you want a stable frame rate. So you might even run your settings a little bit lower than you think you need to, just to make sure it's stable during difficult weather conditions, and when you have a lot of cars on the track. And you can rest assured the game still looks incredible on pretty much every setting. It really looks great, even on the absolute lowest settings. It looks better than most every other racing game out there. So I wouldn't worry too much about what the graphic options say. Turn it down to get a stable, smooth experience, and it will look great and run great.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about the gameplay, because we can talk about like the eye candy all we want. But
sure.
Have you done much of the career mode yet?
I've done a little bit because Project Cars was a game in transition between a PC build. I'll be restarting it soon, but I made it through a little bit of the kart series, and then of course I've done a lot of recording testing, in that I done several test runs with different cars at different tracks, and as I will jokingly say, Project Cars, for all its beauty and glory, it is a game that will hate you, and doesn't care by the fact that it does.
Yeah, I would encourage any new players or anyone who's thinking about getting into a racing sim. I think this is an awesome one to get into. It's not going to be easy. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but you could look at this as the Dark Souls of racing games. It's not there to hold your hand, but it does have some very nice things you can turn on. You can turn on traction control, you can turn on stability control, anti-lock brakes, and you can turn on the guide that goes on the track and shows you how you're driving, which actually I use the guide all the time because it makes me a better driver. Like, I'm constantly having something showing me the proper racing line, and I don't think that's cheap. I know some people think it is, but it's not I'm not playing multiplayer most of the time, so I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
But I like that because it makes me better. But I turn off most of the other options. I think I leave analog brakes on because most of the cars would have analog brakes. I just turn it off for the race cars. But I think once you get into it, I don't think it's that hard. I think most people just don't know how cars work. When it comes to, like, you just can't, like, it feels really slow in the game to take a corner at 80 miles an hour. But think about doing that in, like, whatever crap box you drive to work every day, Like, you're going to die.
Sure.
Like, the game is just realistic.
Yeah. It's a different type of realistic. Coming out of, say, Forza 5, I've now learned from playing Project Cars how much, even with assists off in Forza 5, how much the game is still helping you. One thing that differentiates it a little bit, and I haven't fully tested this yet in Project Cars, but in Forza 5, one of the things that they implemented, and it's actually an Xbox One feature, is the pulse rumble function, which gives you more realistic force feedback. in Project Cars, they also utilize this feature, and it's supposed to help you get an idea. But even without that, if you're just using, say, a standard Xbox 360 controller or whatever your gamepad of choice is, I haven't had experience driving with a racing wheel in a long time, so I can't speak to that. But without the racing wheel, I would tend to think that things like the racing line and some of the assists are perfectly acceptable, because without having that ultra precise feedback for you to be able to sense when the car is about to break loose, judging the apex of a corner, or whether you're going to be able, the car, its stability is going to be able to hold, is going to be incredibly difficult and probably just result in frustrating most people.
Yeah, you have to get used to how the car feels, especially with the controller. You can't go by moment-to-moment feedback all the time because you can't get enough. Like a rumble pack and an analog stick is just not precise enough, like you said. I don't know how many different, like what the polling rate is on a stick, and how many degrees of difference there is between the different angle settings on them, but it's not a racing wheel. And if you look on the leaderboards online, everybody who's in the good races is using a wheel. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted to get one. I just don't have like a good place to put it. But yeah, if you want to really get into this hard, you need a wheel. But like both of us said, we're not using wheels. You can definitely enjoy the game without a wheel. But you will definitely want to turn on some assists, and just there's no reason to be embarrassed by it. This is a very hard game, and you should definitely take your time getting into it. And I like in the career mode that they start you out with karts, except karts are really stinking hard to drive fast. Like if you want to win in a kart, it's like, I know that, as they talk about on the website, tons of very famous drivers like Michael Schumacher and Jeff Gordon and a dozen other people, probably more than that, who are very famous names that you know. They all started with kart racing. It's very cheap to get into. Karts are fast. You can learn proper racing techniques. But those karts are like little slot cars. Like they grip so hard and they turn so fast. I almost think it hurts me in other car races, because in the other cars, you can kind of throw them around a corner a little bit and use the power and trail braking and everything else to kind of guide the car through. But in the karts, it feels like you're only limited by how ballsy you are.
In the career mode, what I've seen with the karts so far is it's kind of a poor introduction, because at least the initial kart tracks that you do are very much actually like your family getaway go-kart tracks. That you would
they
say.
are. They're so small.
They're tiny and they're full of turns, and it really is. It's like it's wherever the closest family entertainment go-kart center is, that's what the first tracks are like. If you went out and did a test with a kart and actually ran one of the longer tracks that was a couple miles and had a straightaway, the kart would probably do okay to, like you said, give you this education on how to drive. But it is very much like either a slot car, or as I started to think the other day, like it's an out-of-control lawnmower. It's just, there's no... The wheels turn, but because of the way the kart's designed, it just doesn't really it has no camber or anything like that. The weight doesn't shift.
There's no suspension to really load up.
And there's actually kind of a, I guess it's a sort of a knock on the simulation in the kart. It doesn't simulate the fact that you're driving the car, therefore you're sitting in it. Thus, when you lean in a go-kart, the weight would shift left or right, which the game doesn't simulate at all.
Yeah, of course it can't do that.
So,
yeah.
But as a difference, though, when you're driving an actual car and you go through a turn, the weight of the car shifts left and right.
And if anyone's listening to this and you don't play a lot of racing sims and you're wondering, well, like, what is the big difference between a kart and the car? Because I don't know if we really explained that. In a car, when you're driving it, you steer with the wheel, of course, or with your controller, but you also steer with your brake, your accelerator, your clutch. Like you use the car, you use the strengths and weaknesses of the car to help you around the track. You don't just use the wheel. That's why there's things like trail braking. You have to get on the gas at the right moment, get off the gas at the right moment, shift at the right moment. You can use all these things to help manipulate the weight of the car around the track. And on a go-kart, in real life, you can lean, like you said. But in the game, really the only thing I was able to do, and I think this might even be a bit of a glitch, is going into a hard corner. If you let off the gas, turn hard, tap the brakes, and then gun the gas while letting off the brakes, it felt like I could turn the car really tightly, but that's like the only thing I've discovered. Everything else is just slow down, go around the corner slow, speed up on the other side. Like there's not a lot of room to grow. It doesn't feel like with the karts. And they're so precise. I almost feel like it's harder to learn them. Like I would almost rather start with that Focus ST on like a big lazy track.
Yep. That's probably a better way to learn, and actually most sims, that's how they start you off on. They give you something like a Ford Focus, or I'm trying to think of another car that's roughly in that class. Something.
I mean, Forza gives you like a Toyota Echo, basically. Like they start you they start you lower than any enthusiast wants to start.
Yeah, it's kind of a it's like, I'm never going to drive this car again. But
well, there was I think in Forza 4 there was one 3-cylinder Toyota hatchback. I can't remember the name. It's not a car sold in America.
Yeah.
Nice thing about it was you could drive flat out pretty much all the time.
Didn't like Gran Turismo 1 or was it 1 or 2 that started you off, like the first license test was like with a minivan?
That was probably
to that
one. I remember something like that. Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, why is this car even in the game? Who pitched that in the meeting?
For the very narrow band soccer moms who also like racing sims. One thing you touched on, Jeremiah, I think the learning curve, if you're not familiar with racing simulators, is going to be really steep, and there will be frustrations, even if you're someone who has an unlimited budget and you're going to go out and buy the latest and greatest thing from Thrustmaster or Fanatec. And even with a wheel starting off, if you've never played a simulation racer and you're not familiar with the concepts of oversteer and understeer, you're going to learn them very fast, because the game is going to just beat you up over them until you get them right.
Yeah.
There's no, even with the assist to a certain point, if it comes down to the physics and everything else. Even with assists, if you go into a corner too hard, you're going to miss it and spin off the track. If you, like you said, if you hit the gas too hard coming out of a corner, you're going to spin out and probably go off the track. The game will help you, but it's only going to help you to the point to where you're still learning. But on the plus side, master Project Cars and you will laugh at every other racing game.
It was funny because when it first came out, I played a bunch of hours in the first couple of days, like 5 or 6 hours, I think. And then I was playing Gran Turismo races with the group, and it was funny because you and I were both playing, and like it wasn't even close. Like we were just racing each other, and everyone else was somewhere else doing whatever. I don't even care.
Yeah.
Because the game, it'll make you good. It'll make you good in pretty much every other game. But if anyone's new to it, I would suggest get like a slow front-wheel drive car. Do not grab an F1 car and go into the game. You will hate it. I'm not even racing the F1 or like the real big GT cars yet. I am working my way up there as I get used to the game. And I've raced those nice cars in other games like Gran Turismo before. But start with like a Focus on a really simple looking track, because it's front wheel drive, so it'll understeer nice and predictably, and it's kind of slow and it's kind of spongy feeling. And once you can lap that pretty successfully, start working your way up. But start from the slowest and work your way up from there. Because if you start, and I think that's probably the problem, is you're going to hop into the game and a lot of people think, oh, well, I want to grab a 911 or I want to grab the McLaren MP12 or something. And those people are going to be very disappointed, because those games are very hard to drive. But the plus side is, once you get to the point where you can drive them, you will appreciate it so much more. Like when you watch people online racing with wheels on like the F1 cars, I mean, it's amazing. Like it looks incredible how fast they're flying through tracks and how perfectly the car is balanced. And then you think, hey, people do this in real life, and that is even more incredible. But start slow, work your way up. I wish the career mode, like it has karts, but I kind of wish there were more regular cars, and you could maybe mix karting and regular cars at the beginning. Like maybe just one of those like track days that are held all over the country where people show up with their Miatas and their Focuses and their old BMW 3 Series and, lap the track for a couple hours. Some events like that I think would be good to mix in with karting, because I'm worried that by the time you get through all the karting, it's like 4 hours of karting. And by the time you get to something else, it's going to be a big adjustment period. You're going to feel like you're on a wobble horse tilting back and forth. It's so slow, and it's going to be really annoying. I mean, that's my experience. I'm back into regular
Yeah.
cars now, and like I'm not enjoying it. I think I'm driving a Lancer Evo, and that thing feels like a boat, which is not how most people would describe a Lancer Evo. But after karts, it really feels like it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that we'll hopefully see, like you said, I hope we'll end up seeing some car packs and things like that. I'd really like to see entire series of cars flesh out. This is one thing I would have no problem with Slightly Mad ripping off either Gran Turismo or Forza by doing so, building out entire classes of cars. It and again, with the way that the game was funded and how it all came about, it does make me understand why that contributes to the low car counts and just picking and choosing what cars they had. You know, they weren't massively funded like, say, a Turn 10 or a Polyphony Digital is, and given that they only had to license so many cars, there are a lot of big names that are missing from this game simply because
Ferrari,
Porsche, yeah.
Well, no, Porsche's in there. Rough is there, but
yeah, the actual port, you know, the entire only Ford has representation from America. There's
I mean, oh my gosh, wouldn't you love to be lapping in a new like Corvette Stingray?
Sure. I think most of the Japanese manufacturers are not in the game. It's primarily European and European, German, the European cars, Germans, Italians, and the Lycan is that's Dubai, right?
That's the first Middle Eastern supercar for sure. Maybe car? I'm not sure. It's from somewhere in Western Asia or Eastern Europe, but I believe it's from Dubai. But yeah, I agree with you. Like I would really like to see, I guess as we're kind of wrapping this thing down, I would love to see car packs. I'd love to see just fleshing the world out a little bit more. I mean, they're good on tracks, they're good on graphics, they're good on weather, they're good on handling. Like, they don't need to change any of that. And I don't honestly think they need to add more stuff to the career mode, but like if there was a car pack, let's say the Modern American Muscle Pack, 10 cars, stuff like the Camaro SS, Challengers, Corvettes, and it was $10, came with a couple different career challenges, like a couple tournaments and things like that. Man, I would buy that. Like, I'd buy $10 of that every month if they had it. And I know they won't, but I hope they come up with that stuff in the future. Which is a testament to how good the game is like, I want as much as they can give me. I want to try every car. I want to try every track. And I know it's going to take me a long time to get there. This is not the type of game where you play for a month or two and you're done. You move on to something else if you really like racing games. This is something that's just like a part of your gaming repertoire for the next couple years, probably.
I did read an interview with Slightly Mad. They have not totally slammed the door on modding or Steam Workshop. They haven't currently. There's no support for it or anything like that. But they haven't said that it won't ever be. That won't ever be true. I would really, even if they just allowed car development from the community, that would fix the car count problem probably almost overnight.
Now, do you think the community can make cars that look this good that will actually perform well without Slightly Mad's experience in optimizing them for this game? Because cars that look this good, they have to be extensively tweaked to not completely wreck your system.
Yeah, I don't know if the tool sets would be made available or not. Where I really think the concern is, even if the visuals and the optimizations weren't the concern, is that I'm willing to imagine that Slightly Mad, much like Turn 10 does for the Forza games, and I'm sure Polyphony does for the Gran Turismo games. I'm sure the cars that are in here, they went out to a racetrack and did actual telemetry captures on these to see how they behave. And that's something that, that's truly to me one thing that next to no one in the community can do.
Exactly.
And
although, they had to have faked it for stuff like the Lycan Hypersport. I don't believe they ever got their hands on one of those. There's 7 in the world.
Probably not.
So yeah. I'm guessing they didn't get them for all of these. But yeah, I mean, the modding community, people are going to be making guesses at best. And there's no other big PC racing game to port cars from either. Like, I'd take, slightly worse looking cars ported over from something else, but we don't have something else.
No. Nothing like this, anyway.
I mean, think about even Need for Speed Shift. I was so excited for Project Cars, I went back and installed it. That game doesn't hold up that well. Like, those cars are much... I mean, the driving's still fun. But the cars themselves and the tracks, like, it wouldn't look good if you brought them over. To match Project Cars' level of intensity, you're going to need the team's involvement on at least some level. And so that is a little bit unfortunate, because I don't see how the community could possibly do that. But, I mean, maybe... even if they just reskinned some cars, it'd be fun to drive around. Like, if they reskinned a Lancer to look like a WRX, the purist in me would go, that's not right. But I want to drive a WRX, so I'd probably be okay with it, just for fun. Mm-hmm. But, like, I don't think we're going to see much past that.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I mean, I'd be fine getting proven wrong.
Yeah, well, I give Slightly Mad a lot of credit here, because this is one thing that I did notice in that, even beyond, us talking about the game, if you see and read reviews on it, you will see a collective opinion that, because simulation racing games all have these sort of standard features and they all behave in this certain way, there were actually some negative writings about Slightly Mad in this game because it's very uncompromising. It's extremely detailed. It's very much a simulation, but because they really stuck to what their vision was, these compromises or the certain things that it lacks that other games that are considered in its class have. I really hope with what you talked about earlier, Jeremiah, about this being a platform. I hope that's the vision, because the game is so future-proofed, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the case. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. I just hope, I really hope one free car per month is fine, but like I said, I'm looking for the packs. I really would hope a year from now that we've added 20 or 30 cars to the game.
And we've said it before,
more.
But just to be clear for anyone listening, we're not complaining about that. Like, we want to give them money. We don't think they owe us more cars just because we bought their game. This is an amazing experience. We will happily give them more money to get more cars, like whatever it costs.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, we want to support them. I want to support this studio. I don't want them to have to go back to working for like a major developer or something just to make ends meet. Like, they've done such an amazing job. I want this to support them for years, and I will happily pay them money. I mean, maybe they just need to do another Kickstarter, like, to add stuff to it. I'd probably kickstart it again.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, this game sells a couple million copies and they have the money in the bank to do whatever they want. But, the realities of game development are it's expensive to do all this stuff.
It is. And simulation racing, even as good as this game is, it's a narrow genre in gaming collectively.
Yeah.
It's, it's kind of in the console world. Microsoft's been using Forza. They used it extensively to try to push the Xbox One, and the audience, it's just not big enough. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. Sony has used Gran Turismo in the past to try to sell it, but I think they've wisened up a little bit and backed off on that. They'll certainly promote the living crap out of GT7 when it comes out.
Yeah, they pumped and dumped GT6. But that game did not. Mm-hmm. It came out way too soon. So many cars were ported over from GT5. Some cars were ported from GT4, which was one whole console generation behind. And the relatively lackluster reviews and performance of that game, I think, made them realize that, hey, they should just take their time and do it right for the next one. But of course, that on the flip side, now people are getting impatient, and whenever we do see the next one, it had better be amazing or people are going to be disappointed.
Hey, we can always hope, and if it's following suit, we'll get Gran Turismo 6 remastered.
Did you have anything else you want to talk about as we wrap down? Any other thoughts about the game?
No, I really think the future's bright. I hope that neither the enthusiasm or the money dries up for supporting this game and going forward. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of games, and not just racing games, but a lot of games start this way. There's a really incredible framework laid, and then it just doesn't even either it continues on and it becomes something completely deviating away from its framework, Assassin's Creed, or very much like Titanfall, you lay this framework for something cool and then you don't do anything with it. So I really think that it's Slightly Mad has put together something really incredible here. They've really I will tell you, Jeremiah, when I first heard about this game, because I've played enough racing games and especially enough simulation racing games, I didn't pay much attention to Project Cars when I first got into it, because it's like, yeah, it's a simulation racer. I know what it's all about. And is it really going to be that impressive? Do you know how many of these freaking games I've played and how many times they try to tell me it's the greatest thing that I've ever pretended to drive?
Well, I don't know about you. When I first saw the promotional screenshots, I was like, oh, whatever. Yeah, great looking pre-res shot, cool. And then as the game got closer to release, it was like, wait, the game looks like that?
This is the real thing. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the, at least being a sim racing fan and a racing game fan, that's what's so amazing about this game, is that it took a genre that probably, while having very wide support with the people who enjoy it, it took something that I think was somewhat stagnant in terms of, oh, another Forza game, oh, another Gran Turismo, we got, and then we're branching off into these social racers, which are having trouble getting off the ground. Horizon 2 kind of being the exception, but that's because it has its Forza pedigree.
Right.
And this game came along and kind of said, no, we can go back and do the sim racing thing, and we can show you how to do it right, and, we can throw the gauntlet down. So I just hope now that Slightly Mad does this, they don't rest on it and they don't drop the mic and walk away. You've established, now dominate.
Yep, I completely agree with you. I don't want to take anything away from any other PC racing game. I'd like them all to be good and successful, but I kind of hope people start moving from some of the older sims into this one, to kind of fill the community out and to turn it into the platform that like iRacing's become, where people want to play on it for the next 10 years maybe. Because I think that's what this game needs. It's amazing now, but its potential to keep going and going and going is really amazing. And I want Slightly Mad to have the opportunity to do it. And if you're wondering, well, I don't really care about racing games. Should I bother picking this up? They sound like cool developers. What should I do? Just wait. It'll probably hit a Steam sale. I'm sure it'll be $10-15 within a year or so. And if you're not sure if you like it, that'd be a good time to pick it up. I think racing games are really hard, but can be really, really rewarding if you get into them. But if you're not at all interested in cars or something, obviously this may not be for you. But I think there's a lot of depth here, and if you wanted to get into a racing sim, even after all the hard things we've said about how difficult this game is, I'd still say do this one. Like, start with probably the best sim. Maybe not the best car selection, not the best customization, but the best simulation, I think, that you can buy right now.
Yeah. And that's the key thing. Ask yourself, even beyond the visuals, which I'm sure we could talk about how great are for another hour if we wanted to, but ask yourself, what part of racing games do you really enjoy? If you like looking at the cars and you like the visual glory, there are other games out there. They don't look quite as good as Project Cars, but they will fulfill your need and not frustrate you. If you really enjoy the driving, now you have a game that delivers visually and gives you the driving, but you really need to understand and know that you enjoy the driving aspects of a simulation racer. Otherwise, you won't appreciate the eye candy of Project Cars, because you won't be able to get yourself in a position to where it's truly admirable. And you need to be able to sit down, and it is humbling. I mean, Jeremiah, you and I both talked about our long history with racing games, and this game routinely makes me look like an idiot.
Yeah.
So it's I get better with it every time when I run my test laps and my practices. I find that every time I get a little bit better and a little bit better, and I start to get a better feel for how the game flows. And but that's really the key thing, is how much do you love the driving? If the driving is what you truly love, then this is your game.
I fully agree. So thank you everyone for watching, and go play some Project Cars or something. Go check it out. If you haven't heard about it before or you haven't been interested in it before, hopefully this video has made you a little more interested. And if you've been on the fence about getting it, hopefully we pushed you over the edge. But thanks for watching, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.